for joining me, Andres from AES. We also have Nancy from Cutting Edge. I'm Christian from Apex Urban Solutions, and today we're going to be talking about compliance, right? So, Nancy, I think this is your forte, right? It is.
So we wanted to talk about how with Andres, how it affiliates compliance with our disassembly and the engine life, right? So compliance in the end, it's what gives it the trace, the trust, and the sustainability of where the part goes and ends up after the fact. So Andres will talk about when the engine gets torn down and the parts get, ready for distribution, it's compliance comes into play, right? And there's different levels of compliance. There's your due diligence, there's your operations compliance, and then there's your end user compliance.
There are different stages.
There's different stages of compliance that you have. You have the beginning, like Andres has to figure out, or even you, who am I selling this part to, right? Can I do business with them? Okay, that's one level. And then what's the next level? Okay, well, is your client telling you to ship it to X, Y, and Z country, right? So there's different levels of compliance that we all have to take into place because most people get confused with, I know this client, so I'm doing business with them, but who is your client selling it to? And we do a lot of the end users with Andres. We do the evaluation of the end users. Why? Why is this important? Because although you know who you're doing business with in the front end, we have to know who we're giving our part to, right? One single missed shipment can cost you as little as $250,000 just in a penalty.
And that terribly affects your model, right? I mean, it really affects everything.
It affects the company as a whole because then you have an engine, you're gonna invest X, you're gonna get Y, you get your profit, you have a customer base, and then
you trust that the customer base is going to keep the same line that you are.
exactly like Nancy was saying, I could sell it to you, I could sell it to Dimitrios, I could sell it to a lot of companies, but I don't know who those companies are dealing with, right? Especially if you're dealing with the special countries and airlines that are probably going to be flagged by Nancy in a way. I don't want to get into details, but there are various ways that somebody could be flagged from a compliance standpoint. And it's not just the money transaction, it's not just having the opportunity to sell it and having a customer, but compliance plays a very, very big role in it. You've got to make sure that everybody complies with what you need to do, documents and KYCs and all the forms to make sure that the sale actually, once it's finalized, it goes through. You don't have to go back, look at having possible issues like she was mentioning before.
So Andres, talk to me about teardowns and how does it affect with the compliance?
So at Aero Engine Solutions, like I've said before, right? So we have the aftermarket, the parts business, and we have the leasing and trading side of it, which, every leasing company needs a parts department. It fits through and you need it, right? So that's how the company was founded. We've been doing it for 10 years. And we started the leasing and trading side of it about 3.5 years ago. So on the parts side, I'm responsible for it, getting the engine down, locating a teardown shop, locating the repair shops as well. Our customer base, that's handled by the commercial team, sales team, so I don't deal with that much. But on the financial aspect, so I have my engine models that tells me how much I need to pay for the engine, what's the profit that I'm going to see, if there are any missing units, any quality issues on some of the units that get removed. And then, of course, it leads you back to the trace paperwork that we talked about in a different episode, right? So if you don't have the required documentation, the trace, if it doesn't check all the boxes for the customer base that you
the
have,
value is
it's zero, right? You're not selling the metal, you're selling the paperwork. And if you don't have the correct paperwork, you're going to get stuck with it, right? And then once you go through all that aspect of taking the unit down, you repair it, and then you sell it. In that meantime, obviously, that's what Nancy comes into play, because then it's got nothing to do with what I do, but it is very much necessary to make sure that that sale goes through and that process is finished.
Right. Because what determines this, although he has a client, what determines for them to finalize it is whether or not can we give it to them, right? Here are the top 3 things that they have to make sure of before they say, here you go, who it's going to, where it's going to, and what. So it also plays like, well, is this part classified under EAR or is it a controlled item, right? In a lot of what we do, sometimes it's qualified as dual use, right? So how do we let them know that because you ship this part, you're not in trouble because it's dual use? So we have to make sure that on top of it, that if it's a US made engine that it was torn down, we classified it correctly under the ECCN. So not only do we have to check the client, we have to properly classify the part. So if you don't understand like what the part is, or are you able to identify it, you're also at risk. So before he finalizes his tear down agreement and the whole nine, those are part of the things that we have to take.
Those are, yeah, you need to have your ducks in a row.
Yeah, and I deal with the ECCN and HTS codes and everything with customs. I get a lot of shipments stuck in customs because the paperwork's not filled out correctly, right? So that's another portion of our business that is not just educating ourselves, but educating our customers to make sure that the importer and exporter declarations are in place to make sure that the part goes through. No hassles, no issues, no penalties, because penalties sometimes is money, and it is a lot of money, right? So you got to make sure that everything's taken care of from the beginning.
And even then, if we do a transaction, he mentioned HTS codes, right? You can have a part that was disassembled, right? And you need it to get repaired. If you send it off for repair, most people, if they don't classify it correctly, they will charge you tariffs on it because you didn't classify it properly on the paperwork when you send it out. So they'll tell you it's not. They won't know that it's a repair and return. So repair and return is you're sending a U.S. goods out, you're bringing it back in, and you don't have no tariffs. But if your paperwork is not in compliance, you will miss that. And not only will it affect your transaction, you will get duties assessed to you. You know, so there's a lot of layers to what we do and how it all comes into play with compliance, customs. There's different ends where it affects our day-to-day.
All right, guys, thank you for joining me. I think this was very productive. We got to know a little more about the teardown and also about compliance and how it affects us. Thank you for joining me, guys. All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate the experience.